Hello, class. Today, I want to make a quick video explaining how you should approach creating a rough mix for your project or for any mix session that you're going to start. Here is a session that the client has provided for me. Let me just make this window a little smaller here quickly. This client has provided his own interpretation, his own rough mix. There are a couple of tracks that have some automation already built into it, which is fine. I'll have to work around it. Some of these automation lines, for example, on the vocal, as the song has gone louder, he has adjusted the dynamics and levels of the vocal to follow the dynamics of the song. And this helps kind of give you an idea of how the client was trying to interpret this arrangement. And up to you if you want to work through those automation lines or if you rather just erase everything and start from scratch. In this case, I've already heard it. The automation lines that were there make sense, so I'm just going to keep it and work through it. If at any point I feel I need to make an adjustment, then I'll just adjust that automation. Let's go over the layout, how I have it right now. I have my mastering meter right here, which is the Uline meter. And I'm going to be paying attention to the integrated loudness. And I have a VU meter down here. I have calibrated the headroom for that VU meter to be -15. That means that 0 VU, when the audio pushes the needle to 0 VU, this is about -15 dBFS, or perceived loudness about -15, which should correlate somewhat to integrated loudness. Okay. The idea with using a VU meter is all the consoles that you have in class have a VU meter. A lot of outboard gear, analog gear, still uses VU meter, and it is a great tool to understand perceived loudness, average perceived loudness. It ignores transients and just gives you the average level that's going through. So I use, and I've been using for many years, a VU to start my mix and build it up from there. How are we gonna start the mix? We're gonna figure out what part of the song has the loudest section. In this case, the song builds up and builds up from a softer passage, minimal instrumentation, and more instrumentation is building up. The section that has most is most charged with instruments and heaviest, loudest part of the arrangement is going to be chorus 3. So what I want to do is loop chorus 3. Once I have chorus 3, or whatever the loudest part of your mix is going to be, and I've set that, paying attention to my master fader to make sure that it's not clipping, that I've achieved an integrated loudness, and maybe you can use also short-term loudness to average out within that window of how you want that loudness to be perceived. Once I've achieved that integrated loudness within that section, now I can move anywhere else through the song, and I'll know that none of the other sections of the songs are going to be louder than this chorus. Nothing else is going to peak or clip the mix, because this chorus 3 is the heaviest section. So it just establishes your end goal of level, and then you just kind of work yourself backwards. It's a very effective way for you to not run out of headroom if you start balancing your mix from the beginning, and then when you get here, you realize you're clipping constantly. Okay, so the method how I was taught, this is called the anchor method. I was taught to mix this way by an old New York engineer. He would tell me that you start with the bass guitar. Why the bass guitar? The bass guitar carries the most weight in a song. A bass has the most energy because of its frequency, and it tends to be a fundamental element of the groove and of the rhythmical section. In this case, the bass is a fundamental rhythmical groove and it provides a melodic line to it. So it is crucial that it sits in the right spot. So once I've established that bass at the level that I want it, we anchor it in that position, meaning once the bass is set where it needs to be, we never touch that bass fader again until we're done completely with a rough mix. This allows you to have this as a reference line. If suddenly you start adding elements and it sounds like the bass is being buried, then you've pushed everything too loud, and you need to push everything back so the bass it has the appropriate clarity, energy, dynamic, and drive that is necessary for this arrangement. If at the end of your rough mix the bass is too loud, then you've been just a little too shy, a little too conservative. Push everything up until you feel like it's the right balance. You don't lose the bass, but you have the right energy, clarity, and understanding of all the other parts, as much as you can, at least during a rough mix. Now, he would tell me that I should put the bass so it averages out on the VU on the master section of the console at about -5 to -7. I'm gonna try to push it to about negative to hover about -5 in this case, and then build everything up from there. By the end of the mix, I hope and I'm going to expect that my integrated loudness is going to be within the range that I'm asking for you guys in class. That range is going to be somewhere between -8 and -15 LUFS, integrated loudness. If I end up being a little too low, then at that point, once everything's leveled out, then I can bump up all these instruments to get to that point where it needs to be. Okay, but we should be pretty much within the ballpark doing it this way, as I'm going to show you. Another thing to keep in mind, since this is the beginning of your gain staging, this is how you're establishing your proper headroom. You need to make sure that all your stem faders are at 0. In this case, this background vocal fader is at 5. There might be some automation on that. There is. So in this case, I'm going to delete that, just put it at 0, and I'll deal with any automation later. I believe there is automation already on the individual tracks. So I'll deal with it in that point. And if all these instruments were too loud in this case, because he had the background vocal bus stem fader at -5, then that means that all of these are 5 dB too loud. So what you should do is go ahead and lower all these by 5 dB. Make sure this is grouped. Lower this by 5 dB. Go to these, lower by 5 dB. Great. So now we've compensated for the dB that we had to lower, the -5 that we went back to 0. We lowered everything to -5, so relatively should be at the same level. But we are starting with all our stem buses at 0. Why are we doing this? As we start with the bass, we want to make sure that we get the proper balance and levels of all the bass tracks. We're going to use the metering right here to make sure that we're not clipping. Your metering should be set to pre-fader. That's options, pre-fader. So the metering on your bus fader is going to be pre this fader, and it's going to tell you what is the overall level achieved by all the bass tracks. That way, if you were in post fader and your fader's at -5 and you're not clipping, your meter says you're not clipping, but in reality you flip to pre-fader and you are clipping, you're not going to really know. So you should always be in pre-fader. So the meter on the current bus is going to reflect the blend that's being fed into it, and then this bass output is going to be reflected in the metering into your master fader. Okay. Now, why do we want to keep this in 0 throughout the entire rough mix, as well as your master fader for this entire class should always be at 0? Why? Once I've established a good headroom and I've established a good level for this bass, I'm going to start processing. I'm going to possibly add EQ, compression, saturation on these inserts. If I then change these levels of these if I then change the balance of these faders on the bass, I will affect how my compression, EQ, and saturation levels will sound and will react. By having the bus fader as an option, once that processing has been done, I'm allowing myself to have a little more of a leeway to compensate slightly if necessary for that adjustments that I'm making with the processing. But if I start pushing things up or down here and not establishing proper headroom here, my levels are going to get a bit crazy, and I could end up having to use gain staging incorrectly. So I want you to establish this levels, they're set, and then after that you adjust anything post these bus stems. Okay. Let's start this process. So again, we're gonna loop this last chorus from chorus 3 to the outro, and we're just gonna solo the bass, and we're gonna try to get the bass to be somewhere around -5 VU. Okay, so it's a little low, but I'm also hearing that it sounds a little thin. There's a lot of DI. Let me bring the bass amp up. Still grouped. I like that rounder tone. We're closer to 5. Obviously, it's a live performance. There's some accents. The bass player's digging in here or there. So I'm trying to get it a little closer to 5. You can ignore those peaks. And it's staying within this range, -5 to -3, kind of lingering around that 5. I'm good with that. That's already putting us at a -20.7, -20.8 integrated. Great. I got the tone that I want between the different bass tracks, and I have the output going to the master fader hitting the VU meter where I think it needs to be. So let's go to drums, and let's start with the kick. Too much of this. So you have a kick in, second kick in, kick out, and you have a sub kick. Let me just lower a sub kick a little bit. I want a little beefier kick. Maybe too much snap. I think this is a brighter snap. I think the kick still overall is a little above. So I'm going to be switching the pick group on off. You can do that by holding Command Shift G, and you'll see the colors go on and off. I want to have enough drive and enough oomph supporting the bass, but not completely overshadowing the bass. That's pretty good. Close this, go to the snare. Okay, that sounds like there's a lot of snare bottom. Just lower that from now. Okay, let me add snare bottom. The wires on the snare bottom we're going to add that white noise, going to add a little of that, more of that sustain and that top end to it. The snare top is more of your smack, your crack of the stick against the head, and this again is going to be sustain and white noise. Maybe a little less. Great, I'm good. I don't want to overthink this too much. I just want to get it a decent balance that makes sense and move on, not get lost in the process. Let's go to overheads. I think the next thing to do, now that we have that balance with the kick and the bass, kick, snare, and bass. That's a little too much. I normally try to go low and then work my way up. There's enough there to accent snare, brighten up the snare, open it up a little bit more, and I'm now getting enough of the cymbals to drive. Let me just add a hi-hat and the ride mic. I'm not going to use this mic. I'm not going to use this mic. This is a room mic, stereo room mic. Too much. Just going to add a little depth, little open tone. Yeah, just enough to hear it, just enough to feel it, just enough to give it a little depth in this case. Okay, that's everything that I need from that bus. Toms. Let me go straight to the toms here for a minute. Yeah, that works. Okay, now that I'm done with the foundation, here's your bass and your drums. Like in the arrangements section in your book, I want to add whatever else is playing rhythmical foundation with the cadence and the bass. In this case, it's another guitar. These two guitars are playing open chords on the downbeat. So I'm going to add these two and balance them out with the guitar and bass. And again, keeping in mind that nothing should overpower the bass. This guitar has automation, and I'm going to keep it. I'm just going to adjust the level of the fader by grabbing it after all the automation is done. There's enough push from the guitar. Moving on. There's another rhythmical guitar part here. It's like arpeggiated guitars. Just providing a nice little kind of twinkle arpeggiated movement to that section. I feel like these should be felt more than heard. I'm gonna just push this bus in this case. I would normally just serial that out. I like the balance that they have there, so I'll keep that. Just kind of want them to gently push behind the rhythm guitars. Okay. So now I have the rhythmical foundation. I'm not too concerned about lead instruments right now. Right now what's happening there is a solo. That's the end of this is solo going into chorus 3. You'll hear the guitar now. It's a little solo there. And then it goes to a different guitar part. That's a part that should be, again, kind of felt, not necessarily heard as much. Okay, these. I'm gonna just mute the lead for a minute. All these keys already have some automation to them. Work with that. Same part, just stacked with different instruments, different patches. Next part. Cool, little ear candy melody, counter melody. Same thing here. 2 tracks playing the same melody, and it's a counter melody to the vocal. It shouldn't be too loud because vocal still needs to be sitting on top of that. So now I have all the basic parts. I got one more down here. Little string pad. Just gonna lower that. Remember, string pads need to be heard, need to be felt, not heard. So easy for a pad to overpower. We don't want that. Okay. So now at this point we have main rhythm section with bass and drums. We have the other main rhythm parts, which would be the downstream open chords on the electric guitars, and then we have some counter melody, counter rhythm parts with the other lead guitar and the keys that are doing some of these different movements across the chorus. And that'll make a little more sense when we hear it against the lead vocal. So everything's sitting nicely. The bass is still prominent and driving. Right, so now we're going to add the vocal. Vocal's a bit low. section's just a little low. Needs to bump it up a bit. See how the transition to a louder section starts happens now. That's better. Maybe just a little more overall. And now that we have the bass where it needs to, we know that lead vocal is the most crucial part in the song, so we can inch it above the bass. Then not so much that you lose the bass and everything else behind it, just enough to you're going to be able to cradle that vocal on top of all the instrumentation, and it just supports it and adds to the vocal performance. Okay, let's add the background vocals. All right, so these background vocals are like a vocal pad happening, and we're gonna treat it again like if it was a keyboard pad, or the function, its function within the arrangement is of a pad. So again, pads can easily overpower because of the sustain that they'll have, and in this case, all the voices, and the density of these. So we want to make sure that they're achieving the result of filling in the spaces between all the other rhythmical notes that are happening throughout the different instrumentations, and filling in the blanks and supporting from behind, feeling it enough. So it's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest. The black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. It's all in my head. But it follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest beneath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. It's all in my head. It follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest beneath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones. It's all in my head, but it follows like a shadow. I think that's a good balance. Now you hear the background vocals coming in, but when they come in, they're not pushing themselves on top of anything. You just feel the effect of it, but the bass is there, the guitars are still pushing, the are still driving, and they're just like a nice support in the background. Okay, so at this point, we have all the elements added, and we're at negative 17.4. So we're right within that margin of where I need it to be. And quite frankly, once I establish the base level where it needs to be right there with a VU at around negative 5 VU, once I've established that the headroom is going to be negative 15, I have the base sit where I need to. I don't really look at any of these meterings anymore. I will keep my eye up here to make sure that the master fader isn't clipping. And in this case, it isn't clipping. All right. I'm trying to get to the master fader over here. Okay. We're good with the master fader. Nothing's clipping. And because I've done this anchor method for so long, I know that I can just set the level of the bass and let my ears be the guide for the rest of the arrangement, so it feels like I'm pushing the song where it needs to be. The balance is right, the clarity is right, the dynamics and the energy is right, and then everything else should just kind of fall into place. And then if I'm a little too low, a little too high, then I can make some minor adjustments, but I should be well within that range of negative 18 to negative 15 dBFS. Sorry, negative 18 to negative 15 LUFS. Okay. Hope this helps. have enjoyed doing your rough mixes. And again, this is something that you can apply to any project that you're working on. Okay. Have a nice day.